morning, everyone. In this video, I'm going to be discussing the effects of what serotonin is responsible for helping regulate in building in terms of body tissues, some of the effects that it has on men's physiology and women's physiology, which is how it affects their bodies, and ultimately how it is controlled. Because the moment you can control serotonin, you can control population. So let's dive into that. Now, serotonin is a neurotransmitter that doesn't necessarily just regulate your mood. It is responsible for creating synthesis of cells of the body. And you might ask, well, what cells are we talking about? Well, for one, serotonin, high levels of serotonin levels cause red blood cells to develop in bone marrow. They also cause gut bacteria to be healthier. In men, higher levels of serotonin result in a lower libido. Whereas also, if you now look at testosterone in men, which is the primary reproductive hormone in men, testosterone production is directly correlated to your serotonin levels. The higher the serotonin levels, the lower your testosterone levels are, and the higher your testosterone levels are, the lower your serotonin levels are. And so how does that affect you as a man? Well, now let's dive into the idea for women. In women, high levels of serotonin result in high levels of estrogen. High levels of estrogen result in high levels of fertility. And high levels of fertility, while creating high levels of fresh new cells, results in the ability to be conceived. And so now when you look at things in women, for example, what is serotonin typically responsible for mood-wise? Happiness. It is the feel-good neurotransmitter. But in women, this serotonin, this happiness, is directly correlated to your cycle. The depressive state begins at the postpartum portion. And as you build in your cycle, you are actually increasing your serotonin levels, resulting in you now being fertile, able to conceive or be fertilized. So you could say, how do you make a woman fertile? You make her happy. But now let's go back to men. And now, how do you do birth control for women? Well, for one, if a woman's body begins to feel fertile under serotonin elevated levels, what do you think is birth control? A trickery to a woman's reproductive organs, making her body believe she is pregnant. And so how do you do that? Well, there's got to be a chemistry set, you could say. And one thing that high serotonin levels result in, ultimately, is something that results in what is known as serotonin syndrome. And what serotonin syndrome does, well, for one, it's typically derived from antipsychotics and antidepressant medications, and if you combine the two, it speeds up the process of this development. Serotonin levels are key ingredients in bone production, cell production, organ regulation, cardiovascular system health, and on and on and on and on. But ultimately, it is dual natured, because serotonin has a flip side to it. You see, it is meant to be processed. Serotonin in the body is meant to be processed, which means it needs to be going somewhere. It needs to be used for its synthesis process of your body tissues. Which now when you use something like an antipsychotic or a antidepressant, which is a serotonergic element, which now causes your body, that's what antipsychotics do. They tell your body to basically stop processing serotonin. How do they do that? They've created a chemical compound that sits on top of your serotonin receptors. And what it essentially does is it causes it to shut down. At the serotonin receptor is where the serotonin neurotransmitter molecule would bind to with other minerals, causing it to enter the cellular level, resulting in synthesis, the building process of cells, development, on and on and on and on. But now when you stop this ability, well, the serotonin has nowhere to go. And in men, for example, higher serotonin levels result in estrogen production. And in women, high levels of estrogen result in fertility. But if a man's, you could say, libido or reproductive health is as a result of his aggression, which means a man's libido, a man's testosterone. A man's testosterone only functions at its optimal level when it is at a balanced level. There has to be a certain amount of serotonin and a certain amount of testosterone at the equilibrium. Because if you're too high in serotonin, if you're too happy, you're less masculine. And if you're less happy, you're more masculine. These are the traits that serotonin gives you as a man. And now when you look at your libido, which is your ability to basically go, this is affected by high serotonin levels, because estrogen shuts down your ability to reproduce as a man. And how do you do that? Well, estrogen. During COVID, we saw a rise in serotonin syndrome. And it takes form in different places, but ultimately it builds around the fact that it is tricking your body into thinking you should not be processing serotonin, and as a result, it's not being used, it doesn't go anywhere, your body starts to deteriorate. High levels of serotonin, as an example, cause osteoporosis, which can cause your bones to shatter because they've weakened in density, because they're no longer producing fresh cells, because you're no longer producing it in your bone marrow. And so now when you see all of these little things, from birth control to controlling you as a man, controlling you as a woman, how powerful is serotonin syndrome? Well, for one, serotonin, I would argue, is the key neurotransmitter to creating life. Because in order for a man and woman to conceive, ultimately for that particular process, a man has to be complete in his masculinity, and a woman has to be complete in her fertility. Which now means that the woman must be very happy and the man must be less happy. And now when you see these equilibriums, all of a sudden you enter a serotonergic process, which creates cellular development. And the moment that sperm enters that egg, serotonin rushes the woman's body. It causes the egg to be fertilized because it creates now the development of all of these new cells. And so what is serotonin? Serotonin is the life molecule. And if you have too much, you begin to die. And if you don't have enough, you begin to die. It's the perfect cocktail. And so now when you look at being a man, being a woman, these are things that are rooted in your very neurochemistry and how it tells your body to not just regulate your mind, but regulate your physiological processes, making you a creator.